with a military-style assault rifle on May 5th, 2018, during an attempted robbery of Mr. Pong's convenience store located at 300 South 54th Street. Mr. Pong is a refugee from Cambodia who became a U.S. citizen in 1998, and he is a married father of 3 young sons. As a result of the shooting, Mr. Pong had his right leg nearly blown off and is presently confined to a wheelchair. Earlier today, a federal grand jury returned an indictment against Patterson, charging him with 1 count of attempted robbery which interferes with interstate commerce, and 1 count of using, carrying, and discharging a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence. On the gun charge alone, he faces a statutory maximum of life imprisonment and a statutory minimum of 10 years imprisonment, which must run consecutively to any other sentence imposed on the attempted robbery count. I want to thank the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which investigated this case, and in particular, Acting Special Agent in Charge Brian Gallagher, Supervisory Special Agent John Bowman, and Special Agents David Kruger and James Hughes, all of whom are with us today. I want to thank the Philadelphia Police Department for its assistance in our investigation, and thank you to Sal Astolfi, the Chief of the Violent Crime Unit in my office, who is prosecuting the case. Also, thank you to Mr. Tom Malone, who is representing Mr. Pong pro bono and helping Mr. Pong to navigate his way through the legal system. And thank you to Mr. Pong for being here today with your family. Mr. Pong's story and the circumstances surrounding this case, which was originally charged by the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, are well known and have been the subject of much public discussion and, understandably, much outrage. After a struggle with an armed assailant in front of his store, all captured on videotape, Mr. Pong was shot and rendered unconscious. His wife, who had been inside the store with the couple's 3 sons, raced from the store and found her husband face down on the sidewalk, bleeding profusely. He was rushed to the hospital, where he went into cardiac arrest and remained in a coma for several weeks. Following a long hospital stay and a period in a rehab facility, he returned home in August 2018. Mr. Pong is now confined to a wheelchair and does not know if he will ever walk again on his own. In July 2018, Javon Patterson was arrested by the Philadelphia police. He was charged with attempted murder, aggravated assault, robbery with the threat of immediate serious injury, possession of a firearm by a prohibited person, possession of a firearm on a street in Philadelphia, possession of an instrument of crime, simple assault, and recklessly endangering another person. After a 2-minute hearing in the Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas, the District Attorney's Office dropped the attempted murder charge, both gun charges, the simple assault charge, and the recklessly endangering charge. And Patterson was sentenced to 3.5 years to 10 years imprisonment as part of a plea deal that was negotiated by the District Attorney's Office. In violation of the Pennsylvania Crime Victims Act, the District Attorney's Office told Mike Pong nothing of this deal. When the public first learned of this deal and criticism of it mounted, a spokesman for the District Attorney's Office defended it, saying that withdrawal of the attempted murder charge was, quote, wholly appropriate, as the video evidence depicted a struggle involving the gun prior to the discharge, unquote. Now, I have carefully considered that statement, and I still do not understand it. I guess it's supposed to mean that because Mike Pong decided to fight for his life and to protect his wife and children, the person who shot him somehow deserves a break. As for the sentence imposed, the district attorney's office spokesman went on to state that it too was, quote, wholly appropriate, unquote. When public criticism of the sentence continued, the district attorney's office tried a different approach. This time, the office blamed the assistant district attorney working on the case. The district attorney's office spokesman claimed that, quote, the assigned ADA made two mistakes. First, she did not contact the victim prior to the plea, and second, she did not get authorization from her supervisor to convey the plea offer, unquote. What does that explanation tell us? It tells us that nobody in leadership at the district attorney's office even knows what's going on in plea negotiations or in the courtroom in significant violent crime matters. In the absence of supervision, however, the assistant district attorneys certainly know that they are to pursue deals that will please the district attorney, or else they risk losing their jobs. And there is no doubt that the assistant district attorney in the Patterson case did exactly that, offering a lenient 3.5 to 10-year deal because she thought that reflected the new priorities of the district attorney's office. Whether this plea deal was approved in advance or not, nobody in leadership at the district attorney's office should be blaming the assistant district attorney. The first principle of running a prosecutor's office, or any office for that matter, is that the leader of the office is responsible for everything the office does or fails to do. Running a large prosecutor's office comes with public scrutiny and can come with public criticism. Leaders take personal responsibility. They don't blame the people who work for them. Mike Pong deserves justice. The new district attorney's office was not able to provide it to him. He will now have his chance to be heard in federal court. And what has the new district attorney's office meant for Philadelphia more broadly? Potential criminals on the streets of our city are not stupid. They pay attention to what is happening at the district attorney's office. When the district attorney begins his tenure by summarily firing the office's most experienced prosecutors and casually maligning them as they exited the building, when the office is woefully understaffed, when the new hires at the office share their boss's anti-law enforcement philosophy, when the Philadelphia Police Department absorbs constant, unfair criticism from the office, when the office routinely violates state law by not communicating with victims of violent crime, when the office consistently undercharges violent crime cases, when it offers sweetheart deals to violent defendants, when its overall stated priority is decarceration, when the office leads the charge for lenient bail conditions, when the office issues a memorandum of new policies that reads like something written by a radical defense attorney, and when the district attorney refers to himself as, quote, a public defender with power, unquote. Violent criminals take notice of all of that, and they become emboldened. They think that they can literally get away with murder. Sadly, there are likely to be terrible consequences for public safety in Philadelphia as a result of all of this. The only way to effectively deter homicide and other serious violent crime is to put fear into the hearts of those who would commit these crimes, fear of the law enforcement consequences. The Philadelphia District Attorney's Office isn't putting fear into the hearts of anybody who is contemplating a life of violent crime. Instead, what's even worse is that the office is putting fear into the hearts of law-abiding citizens who have to deal with the terror of homicide and other violent crime in their neighborhoods. Unfortunately, we are seeing the results of this already. In 2018, the district attorney's first year in office, Philadelphia endured a staggering 351 homicides. the most in over a decade, which is an 11% increase as compared to 2017. There were 1,365 shooting victims in the city in 2018, the most since 2011, also an 11% increase as compared to 2017. Thus far in 2019, this alarming pattern has continued, as there were more homicides in January 2019 than there were in January 2018. Just last week, an 18-year-old was fatally shot in North Philadelphia, the third teenager to be killed by gunfire in the city in a week. The chart to my left, as you can see, depicts the number of homicides in the city on a yearly basis from the years 2013 to 2018. These 2018 Philadelphia homicide numbers have occurred against the backdrop of a sharp decline in homicides nationwide. According to preliminary reports, in 2018, homicides were down approximately 7% nationwide in cities with more than 1 million residents. Nearby, Chester, Pennsylvania, saw a 38% decrease in homicides in 2018, and both Camden, New Jersey and Newark, New Jersey also experienced a decrease. It is not a coincidence that Philadelphia saw a double-digit percentage increase in homicides in 2018, while our nearby cities and the nation as a whole experienced a significant decrease. The policies of the District Attorney's Office are undoubtedly playing a large role in this tragedy, and nobody should be surprised by it. I'm certainly not. And who is it that is dying as a result of this homicide epidemic in our city? By and large, it is African Americans, as well as Latinos. In 2018, 276 of the 351 homicide victims were African Americans, or 79%, while 44 of the 351 were Hispanic, or 13%. Thus, a whopping 92% of the homicide victims in Philadelphia in 2018 were African American or Hispanic. The chart to my left depicts the number of homicides in the city on a yearly basis from 2013 to 2018, broken down by the race of the victim. This chart tells a most unfortunate story, and it's one that the District Attorney's Office should be working hard to fix, not, as it is doing with its current policies, making worse. The policies of the District Attorney's Office are harming minority communities all across the city. And the people who have the right to be the most outraged by these policies are those in the African American community and the Latino community. Everyone in the city, and I mean everyone, deserves to live in a safe neighborhood. The district attorney calls himself a public defender with power. That is not his job. He's not supposed to be a public defender advocating for defendants. He's supposed to be a prosecutor advocating for victims, victims like Mike Pong, and protecting the community. But I can assure you this: the prosecutors of my office, working with our federal and state law enforcement partners, as well as with the Philadelphia Police, will do everything in our power to keep the city safe. Thank you, and at this time, I would be happy to take any questions.
Would you say that District Attorney Larry Krasner is a danger to the people of Philadelphia?
What I'm saying is the policies that his office is pursuing are a danger to Philadelphia. This is not a personal thing, this is a policy thing. And that I think that the policies are leading to a rise in the most serious forms of violent crime, which are homicides and shootings in the city.
So would you directly correlate his policies to the rise in homicides as you displayed on this board?
You picked a good word to describe that, correlate, because you cannot ignore the correlation. You have to look at what changed in the city in 2018. What changed in the city was major changes to the DA's office. And what changed in the statistics? What changed in the statistics is that despite a sharp decrease in homicides nationwide, we see a sharp increase in homicides in Philadelphia. You look at that correlation and you can draw common sense conclusions from it. So yes, the two of those are definitely correlated, and the DA's office bears a large amount of that responsibility.
Mr. U.S. Attorney, what are the double jeopardy repercussions in Mr. Pong's case?
There is no double jeopardy repercussion here because we have a somewhat unusual situation where the federal authorities have come in. We are a separate sovereign. We have separate statutes that are being used in this case from the local statutes. So even though we have the same set of operating facts, you have two different criminal justice systems. And so it is constitutional. There's not double jeopardy considerations for someone to plead guilty and be sentenced on a local case, and then for the federal authorities to get involved. That being said, this is somewhat rare. This doesn't happen a lot. And in order to get permission to charge federally a case that has already pled or already been sentenced locally, you have to go to Washington to get permission. And we got that because we think there's an important federal interest in vindicating Mr. Pong's rights here and protecting the community and punishing violent crime appropriately, which we don't think was done in the previous case.
But certainly in the defense representing him, they're going to bring up that very topic, that there was a plea arrangement. He was sentenced in the case.
Well, nobody is going to be hiding from that fact. That is a fact. But it does not rise to a double jeopardy issue.
Is that because the federal charges supersede the local charges in this case?
No, the federal charges are separate. So it's separate sovereigns, separate charges, separate statutes. So without getting too deep into what's going to happen in the case, because that's going to be determined by the filings and what judges assign and what the judge decides and whether this goes to trial and the like. But generally speaking, the defendant, if he were convicted federally, will have to serve his state time and also serve the federal time.
So when you say you went to Washington to get permission for this very rare action, is the DOJ, is the Department of Justice in Washington concerned about the policies of this district attorney in Philadelphia?
I have not had those kind of conversations specifically about that. I thought you were going to ask about whether they approved or how deep they were involved in approving this decision. And I was going to say that there are mechanisms in place, somewhat routine mechanisms in place, when these sort of things arise, and it happens in different districts. So in that sense, the Department of Justice in Washington is very much aware of what's going on. But in terms of how to deal with this problem in this district, that's my responsibility.
Mr. State's Attorney, would you say, after what you said about what you've noticed and what you showed in the homicides, is this directly the result of Larry Krasner? I ask you that because I've seen in other cities where there wasn't a change in the district attorney, say Chicago, the homicide rate tends to fluctuate.
There are a lot of different factors that go into violent crime rates. There are a lot of different factors that go into homicide rates. So I'm not saying that you can connect the dots perfectly and say that there's perfect causation. But what I am saying is that you have to bring your common sense to this, and you have to look at the correlation. There's a very, very strong correlation here. And then I think you make common sense judgments and determinations that are also informed by our knowledge of human nature, right? Human beings respond to systems of rewards and punishments. If you are reducing the punishments and your ideology is that you're reducing the punishments for everybody and you're essentially pursuing an anti-law enforcement agenda, well, common sense tells you that if you're pursuing that and then homicides go up, that has something to do with it.
When you see a city with the size of Philadelphia where you say there is an anti-law enforcement agenda, how perilous does the city become?
I'm very concerned about it. Well, right now we see 351 homicides in the city. We're at an even increased rate so far in 2019. And to me, that is a tragedy. And the people behind me here And the people who work in the office with me and all of our federal partners we are going to focus on this. We are one of the largest, really most powerful U.S. attorney's offices in the country. And when we train our sites on a problem, we can make a difference. And so you are going to see us do more cases in the violent crime area. You're going to see us do more cases having to do with illegal guns. We can, through our intelligence procedures, try to figure out who in the city is most likely to shoot somebody. And then if they're found with a gun, for example, if they're somebody who has a felony conviction on their record and are not allowed to have a gun, we can bring a felon in possession charge, we can bring straw purchasing charges, we can bring robbery charges if the robbery involves interstate commerce like it did with Mr. Pong's store. You are going to see our office take a more aggressive role in 2019 in this area because we have a responsibility to react to this tragedy. And our hope is that the district attorney's office will be with us shoulder to shoulder doing the same thing. I am not here today to say that we don't want to work with the district attorney's office. What I'm here to say is that we want the policies of the district attorney's office to change, to focus more on public safety, to focus more on victims, and less on being concerned about advocating for defendants.
U.S. Attorney McSwain, District Attorney Krasner ran on a platform of criminal justice reform, especially helping people of color in communities across Philadelphia. Are you saying his policies are not looking out for those people?
First of all, I'm not saying that all reform is bad or that we shouldn't reform certain things in our system. But reform needs to be responsible, and when it comes to violent crime, reform needs to be incremental. And on the federal level, you have seen some reform. Just recently, at the end of 2018, the Congress passed the First Step Act, which reduces certain mandatory minimums for serious crimes. It does such things as gives inmates a chance to earn good time credits and to do things in prison that will prepare them better for life outside of prison when they're released. And we're supportive of all of that. But it's responsible and it's incremental. It's the First Step Act. What the district attorney has basically done is unilaterally sort of passed in Philadelphia the 100-Step Act. Okay? It's too much. It's irresponsible. He needs to proceed cautiously and carefully and incrementally and responsibly, especially when we're talking about violent crime, or else people are going to die.
If this situation persists, I just want to be clear, is there any scenario under which the Department of Justice can exercise its authority legally to change the policy of the district attorney's office?
We are not going to do anything inappropriate. We are not going to interfere in any way that anyone could say is inappropriate. What we're going to do is have our house in order and try to encourage our partners, like the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, to have the right policies and the right attitude. But if you're asking, can we go in there and take over the District Attorney's Office? Of course not, and we would never presume to do something like that. But I think it's important that the public knows what's at stake here. Okay, what's at stake here is people's lives. People are being murdered on our streets at a record rate, and it's not a coincidence that it happened that way in 2018. And I want to see the numbers in 2019 go down significantly.
You described how rare this is, that you would have, for example, a suspect who's been charged, sentenced at the local level, and then also is facing charges at the federal level and presumably a trial. How rare? I mean, has this ever happened in your career?
I have never personally been involved in a case like this. Sometimes what happens when the federal authorities get involved after there was a local case, it's in the civil rights context. You've seen that in the past. I mean, just to give everybody an example that everybody knows about was the Rodney King situation many years ago. So the Civil Rights Department sometimes is monitoring cases in the local sphere, and then if something doesn't turn out the right way, or in the federal authorities' opinion in the right way, they can then come in and try to correct the miscarriage of justice. But in terms of violent crime, I would say it's pretty unusual, but unusual steps are required when you're dealing with an unusual situation. And Philadelphia has certainly never seen a district attorney like this, and I don't know if the country has ever seen a district attorney like this. So we are going to be flexible, we're going to be vigilant, and we're going to do whatever we can to protect public safety.
I have a question.
Can I get a question from Julia first? Go ahead.
U.S. Attorney McSwain, do you expect your office to federally charge more court system if there is a federal offense involved?
The question was whether we're going to see more cases like this, and my hope is no. My hope is that the district attorney's office will do what it's supposed to do in the cases that it deals with in the violent crime arena, and this won't be necessary. But again, we're going to be vigilant, we're going to be proactive, and if there's a case that we think like this was a miscarriage of justice and we have federal jurisdiction over it, again, we can't just take every single case. We don't have the manpower to do that, and we often don't have the jurisdiction to do that. But if there's a case that's appropriate, of course we'll consider this again in the future. But my hope is that it won't be necessary.
Did this stand out, and have you seen other cases that have been similar in terms of leniency?
This case definitely stood out, and I think that that's why there was so much public outrage about it. I'm not really going to comment on other cases other than to say that, yes, we've seen, I think we've all seen, anybody who's paying attention to what's going on in the office, that there has been a pattern that has been established, and certainly when it comes to notification of victims and keeping victims informed about plea deals, we've seen the office violate state law over and over and over again. And unfortunately, there doesn't really seem to be any teeth to enforcing that law. So really the teeth is making the public aware of it and the public demanding that the district attorney's office follow the state law and keep victims informed about plea deals.
Mr. McSwain, you have complained about the city sanctuary city policies, especially with the recent case just this week in the Juan Ramon Vasquez case, in which there was not a ICE detainer sought by the city, even though he ended up obviously pleading guilty to raping a 5-year-old girl after his illegal reentry. Have there been other instances like that in your view?
Well, I'm glad you raised that because I did want to say something about the Vasquez case. First of all, the Vasquez case was just such a preventable tragedy, a terrible case where because the city did not respect the ICE detainer that had been lodged against Mr. Vasquez, instead of him coming into federal custody and then being deported to Honduras, instead he was released into the community where he raped a young girl repeatedly. And the city's response, which I noticed that they gave to the public about what should be done differently in these cases, I'm actually going to refer to it. They said that the city of Philadelphia has always cooperated fully with federal arrest warrants, and we will continue to do so. We simply request that ICE obtain a warrant to ensure compliance with the U.S. Constitution. This request is not burdensome. So their position is, we are going to ignore ICE detainers, but we won't ignore federal arrest warrants. So they're saying to the feds, go get a federal arrest warrant. First of all, a detainer is absolutely a legitimate legal document. They should be respecting detainers. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we were to go along with their new requirement that they want an arrest warrant instead of a detainer. Well, the fact is, there have been cases where my office has gotten a federal arrest warrant and the city has ignored it. So I take issue with that response from the city earlier this week saying that they have fully cooperated with federal arrest warrants and will continue to do so. And I would point you to a particular case. The defendant's name is Alan Torres Gomez. Alan Torres Gomez is a citizen of Mexico, and he was arrested in 2017 for aggravated assault, simple assault, terroristic threats, and recklessly endangering. And we found out about it, and we went and got a complaint and warrant charging the defendant with illegal reentry. We knew he was a citizen of Mexico. We knew he had committed these additional crimes. He was in local custody. We went and got a federal arrest warrant from the federal judge. And what did the city do after it received that federal arrest warrant? They ignored it. And he was released on November 27th, 2018, after he was done being in local custody. And instead of coming into our custody, they ignored the federal warrant. And Mr. Torres Gomez was then released into the community, and we started looking for him. And we haven't found him. We don't know where he is. Alan Torres Gomez is out there in the community somewhere because Philadelphia ignored a federal arrest warrant and released Mr. Torres Gomez into the community. So my question for Mayor Kenny is, where is Alan Torres Gomez? That's a question that I hope it gets asked. Where is he? And why is he not in custody? And I'll give you a preview of what the answer is going to be, but I still think he should have to answer it. The answer to where Alan Torres Gomez is that he has no idea. The mayor has no idea where he is. And why is he not in custody? Because Philadelphia ignored a federal warrant. And that's not the only example. There have been other examples where they have ignored federal arrest warrants, but we have been successful in tracking down the illegal alien in the community and arresting and deporting him. But here, we haven't found Alan Torres Gomez. And that keeps me up at night. I'm worried about that. God forbid that he commits another crime when he's out in the community. God forbid that he commits a violent crime or commits a rape or kills someone. Okay? The city and the mayor in particular better pray that Mr. Torres Gomez doesn't commit another crime, because the reason he's out there is because the city has a sanctuary city policy, and not only do they ignore detainers, but they ignore federal arrest warrants.
I have a question related to the legalization of marijuana on the federal level. Senator Booker is proposing a new bill. I think it's out today. Or I would say re-proposing his bill to legalize marijuana at the federal level. If you can, talk about what, if that comes to pass at some point down the road, what that would mean for federal law enforcement.
I don't think I really want to get into the details of that, other than to say that we in this office focus on impact cases, big cases. And so we have prosecuted marijuana cases in this office, but they involve marijuana trafficking, large amounts of marijuana. Oftentimes there's violence involved. Oftentimes there's other drugs involved. So it's not like it's completely hands-off of marijuana prosecutions, and we're going to follow the law, whatever the law is. And if Congress changes the law or the state legislature changes the law, we have to take that into consideration. But right now, our focus is on large-scale marijuana cases as long as the law is what it is. I'll take maybe one more question if anybody has anything. Okay, thank you very much.